The Douglas A-26 Invader, the final twin-engine bomber manufactured for the U.S. Air Force with propeller propulsion, flew missions in 3 major wars before being retired from service. Until 1969, this iconic aircraft, which was created and manufactured by the Douglas Aircraft Company during World War II, was used in several Cold War battles as well as wars in Korea, Vietnam, and Southeast Asia. 1994 was their final flight outside of official military operations. Several of these aircraft have recently joined the Commemorative Air Force fleet, demonstrating their capabilities in a variety of tasks, following 21 years of restoration effort. The popular A-20 Havoc aircraft of World War II was replaced by the Douglas A-26 Invader. The Martin B-26 Marauder, which made its maiden flight 2 years earlier, was frequently mistaken with it. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp 18-cylinder double-row radial engine propelled both variants. The newly developed NACA 65-215 was put in the Invader's airframe. Engineer Amos Smith created the laminar flow airfoil. On July 10, 1942, the prototype XA-26 made its maiden flight over California, demonstrating superb handling and performance. The A-26B and A-26C were aircraft designed to carry out a variety of missions, including targeted bombardment, while the A-26C featured a glass bombardier nose for medium-altitude bombing. The A-26B had all-purpose nodes for machine guns and autocannons. After upgrades, 1570 aircraft were manufactured, with 3 cannons added to each wing. With the development of the 8-nose, the armament was increased to include certain types and 1450 caliber machine guns. The B and C variants have replaceable noses. The flat top canopy of the first 820 production aircraft was later cleared for visibility. The crew of the A-26B and A-26C aircraft was made up of the pilot, another crew member, and a third crew member. In the A-26B, the pilot controlled the nose gun, while in the A-26C, the second crew member served as both the navigator and the bombardier. A sophisticated dual and periscope mechanism was utilized to remotely operate the dorsal and ventral gun turrets from a jump seat. The development of this gadget required time, which delayed production. It had a mirror in the middle and a vertical column with periscope sights that could be raised, lowered, and transversed. Using grips on both sides, the gunner aimed the weapons in the same direction as the periscope. In September 1943, Douglas sent the A-26B to the U.S. Army Air Forces. In June 1944, the aircraft made its combat debut in the Southwest Pacific Theater with the 5th Air Force, assisting in the recovery of Japanese-occupied islands in Indonesia. But the 13th Squadron of the 3rd Bomb Group's Grim Reapers discovered a hindrance in the downward vision obscured by the engines, making the A-26B unfit for ground support. The commander of the Forest Air Force, General George Kinney, declared that the A-26 was not a substitute for anything. The A-26 Intruder, which the 9th Air Force debuted in September 1944, was warmly welcomed across Europe. After 8 flights, none of the aircraft, which belonged to the 386 Bomb Group's 553rd Squadron, were lost. The 9 then switched to the new A-26 Invader for their A-20s and Martin B-26. Also converting to the Invader were the Bombardment Group's 409th and 416th. They entered battle with the freshly deployed A-26B in November 1944, but were forced to use the A-20 Havoc for combined operations due to a lack of A-26C glass-nose versions. Up to the conclusion of the war, the Invader was mostly utilized for bombing and strafing, but it was also deployed for tactical reconnaissance and night interdiction operations. The type was renamed as the B-26 once the U.S. Air Force was independently established in 1947. The Martin B-26 Marauder was withdrawn, and the RB-26 reconnaissance variant was in use until 1950. Operating out of southern Japan, the B-26 bombers of the 3rd Bombardment Group were among the first U.S. Air Force aircraft to take action in the Korean War. On June 29, 1950, they dropped the first bomb in North Korea and conducted operations over South Korea. With modified models for weather observation and reconnaissance flights, the B-26 was utilized for both night and daytime support operations. Chinese interference forced the 452 Bombardment Wing to relocate to Miho Air Base. Their stealthy operations from Pusan East Airfield persisted in 1951, sweeping the western portion of the nation and focusing at night on the east. The Korean Presidential Citation was awarded to both bomb groups, along with 2 unit citations, just 24 minutes before the ceasefire went into force. On June 27, 1953, Douglas B-26 Invaders carried out the final bombing raid. They were credited for 8 missions in which they destroyed 38,500 automobiles, 406 locomotives, 3,700 railway wagons, and 7 ground-based aircraft. The CIA flew the first B-26 bomber to land in Thailand in 1960. They served as air support for the Laotian government during Operation Mill Pond and were assigned to Project Farmgate in South Vietnam. B-26Bs and B-26Cs were converted into RB-26C reconnaissance aircraft in combat during the Vietnam War. The B-26 was taken out of service in 1964 following 2 mishaps, and the Douglas A-1 Sky Raider took its place. The B-26K was enhanced for counterinsurgency operations by the On-Mark Engineering Company, and it saw its maiden production flights in May 1964. 40 of the Invaders were converted in all. Politically, the Invader was renamed A-26A in May 1966 because Thailand would not permit U.S. bombers to land on its territory. The Ho Chi Minh Trail's supply lines were interfered with by the code. Douglas constructed 2,503 Invaders. Several redesigns were made to the A-26 and B-26 Invaders, which were utilized in covert operations, target towing, special operations, and utility squadrons. The last active Invader to leave the U.S. military was retired in 1972 after serving in the Air National Guard. The National Air and Space Museum received the donation after that. After being restored for 2 decades, a third intruder from the Commemorative Air Force made its first flight in November 2020. Since it may legally be flown to generate funds, the aircraft is intended for touring and air exhibitions. After being a key component of the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba, the aircraft was given to the National Air and Space Museum.